Konnichiwa, Mina! And now it's time for week 17 of the 2016 PFA season, the week of December 4th and 5th. But before we begin, we gotta take a look at the standings after last week. So here's the standings after 16 weeks. And in the National East, Washington has a 3-game lead over Boston. Omaha, still undefeated, has a 6-game lead over Denver in the National Central. Atlanta's tied with Birmingham still with the tiebreaker in the National South. And Portland has the tiebreaker over Los Angeles in the National West. In the Century East, Baltimore has a half a game lead over Pittsburgh in the Century East. The Century Central, Chicago has a 3-game lead over Minneapolis. New Orleans has a half a game lead over Dallas in the Century South. And San Diego has a 2-game lead over San Francisco in the Century West. Now here's the playoff standings in the National Conference. As we can see, Omaha and Washington still have the byes. Phoenix has the 3rd seed. Atlanta has the 4th seed. Los Angeles has the 5th seed, and Birmingham has the 6th seed. And there are a couple playoff scenarios this week. Omaha can clinch first round bye if they win, and Phoenix and Los Angeles lose. But if Washington loses as well and they win, they will clinch home field advantage. Also, Washington can clinch the National East if they win or Boston loses. Also, Milwaukee and Cleveland will be eliminated if they lose their games. So then we go over to the Century Conference, where Chicago has the tiebreaker over San Diego for the top seed in the Century Conference, with San Diego's 2nd spot. Baltimore has the 3rd spot. New Orleans has the 4th seed. Pittsburgh has the 5th seed, and Dallas has the 6th seed. Chicago can clinch the Century Central today if they win or Minneapolis loses. San Diego can clinch a playoff spot if they beat San Francisco, and Baltimore can clinch a playoff spot if they beat El Paso today. And Seattle will be eliminated if they lose. But now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at the schedule for this week. First up would be Louisville going to Atlanta, Philadelphia going to Boston, Honolulu going to Cincinnati, Jacksonville going to Cleveland, San Antonio going to Indianapolis, Tampa going to Kansas City, Birmingham going to Manhattan, Phoenix going to Milwaukee, Oakland going to Minneapolis, a big showdown, Omaha going to New Orleans, Chicago going to Oklahoma, a very important Central Conference game, Detroit going to Orlando, a big showdown, Pittsburgh going to Washington. Then we go to the 4 p.m. games, a big important game in the Century West, San Diego going to San Francisco, Seattle going to Las Vegas, a big game in National West, Portland going to Los Angeles, and then Baltimore going to El Paso. And then we get to the Sunday night, which is going to be Columbus going to Houston, and then the Monday night game, Buffalo going to Miami. So now let's get week 17 underway. So up first we go down to Atlanta, where the Atlanta Trojans host the Louisville Saints, who are finally satisfied that they finally got their first win of the year. And this is also a rematch from week 1. And in an upset, Louisville will shock Atlanta, winning 24-14, And Louisville's running back Justin Dow had 18 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown. Plus their wide receiver Scott Buono had 5 receptions, 148 yards, but 0 touchdowns. But Atlanta's wide receiver Joseph Eanes continue to impress this year. 4 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Man, after Atlanta started off 6-0, they've gone 3-6 since. They're barely hanging on for a playoff spot in the National Conference. Then we go up to Boston for a important National East game. Philadelphia going to Boston. And if Boston loses, Washington would clinch the National East. So Washington is watching this game intently for the results. And Philadelphia would sweep Boston to give Washington the National East. Boston has now lost 3 straight. And Philadelphia's quarterback Leroy Breck, 19-31, 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. That's the last 4 games he's done 3 great games. But Boston's quarterback Steelen Osborne was 22 of 29, 254 yards, and a touchdown. Philadelphia's wide receiver Brian Coombs, 6 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. And also another of their receivers, Everett Shapiro, 3 receptions, 111 yards, and a touchdown. But Philadelphia's linebackers Rick Lopez had 11 tackles, and James Harlan had 10 tackles and a sack. So congratulations, Washington Americans, for being the 2016 National East champions. Man, for a while at the beginning part of the year, it looked like it could have gone either way between Cleveland, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington, but Washington has pulled through. So now they're going to try their best to clinch a first-round bye and maybe even home field advantage, but that's going to be very, very, very difficult. So after Boston, we went down to Cincinnati as the Cincinnati Colts hosted the Honolulu Phantoms, who have now won 2 in a row, and Cincinnati's trying to end a game losing streak. And Cincinnati steamrolled the Honolulu defense to win 45-24, the most points they've ever scored. Hawaii's quarterback Richard Clough was 17 of 24, 224 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. But Cincinnati's quarterback Walter Morgan was 23 of 32, 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Cincinnati's running back Jose Bolt had 11 receptions, 125 yards and a touchdown. Attempts, and his first 100-yard rushing game. Honolulu's wide receiver Eric Fay had 4 receptions, 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Cincinnati's wide receiver David Hurd, 7 receptions, 105 yards. But Honolulu's linebacker Wilson Sharp had 15 tackles. Then we stay in Ohio a little north as the Cleveland Bulldogs host the Jacksonville Bucks, a rematch from week 7, I believe, or 8. Jacksonville will get revenge from that game and win 30-20 to eliminate Cleveland from the playoffs. Michael Witters was 18 of 25 for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns. Desmond Hager was 18 attempts, 100 yards. And Jacksonville's wide receiver Michael Horn was 3 receptions, 158 yards and a touchdown, including an 84-yard grab. Cleveland's tight end, first time we heard a tight end ever, Galvin Croft had 5 receptions, 103 yards for his first 100-yard game. Cleveland's linebacker Gary Simon had 11 tackles, and Cleveland's defense had 5 sacks in that game, but still was not enough to stop Jacksonville. What a train wreck of a season it's been for Cleveland after all the injuries. They start off 3-0, and they've gone 4-9 since. Then it's down south to Indianapolis, as the Indianapolis Express, who is on a 3-game win streak, hosts the San Antonio Longhorns. And Indianapolis decided to keep the roof open with the rain coming in to give them some sort of home field advantage against San Antonio. And San Antonio would come back 32-25 in an incredible game. San Antonio's quarterback Glenn Chim was 20 of 31, 263 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Indianapolis's running back Kevin Smith had 23 attempts, 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. And wide receiver for San Antonio, Deion Gardner, had 4 receptions, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns, keeping San Diego still in this tight race for a playoff spot in the National Conference. After that incredible finish in Indianapolis, we go out to Kansas City as the winless Tampa Tropics are being hosted by the Kansas City Hammerheads, who are trying to get their first time above 500 in franchise history. But it wouldn't happen as Tampa would upset Kansas City with a touchdown with 48 seconds left to get their first win ever and end a league-long 14-game losing streak. Oh man, what terrible luck for Kansas City. Tampa's running back Edward Robinson had 20 attempts, 109 yards and a touchdown. But Kansas City's wide receiver Reginald Jones had 4 receptions, 129 yards, and there was 9 sacks total in this game, including 2 players getting 2 sacks each. What an embarrassing loss for Kansas City, and that's going to continue their horrible season. We now go up to MetLife in East Rutherford, New Jersey, as the Birmingham Hornets are visiting the Manhattan Greens, with Birmingham having a shot to take the lead in the National South, with Manhattan missing Jamie Norwood for this week. Let's see how his backup does. Birmingham would win in a hard-fought defensive struggle to get their first win season ever and take the lead in the National South. Oh man, Manhattan did terrible without Jamie Norwood. But their running back, Edward Bortles, had 28 attempts, 106 yards. But Birmingham's linebacker, Christopher Vela, had 11 tackles. And cornerback Jacob Taylor had 6 tackles, 2 interceptions, including 1 going back for a touchdown that would be the deciding factor in this game. Then it's out to Milwaukee as the Milwaukee Lakers host the Phoenix Storm in a matchup next week when they're going to be on Monday night. And Milwaukee decided to have the roof open today to get the 35 degrees in here to hopefully stifle Phoenix's performance. But it wouldn't work as Milwaukee got fucked 41-17 by Phoenix and will be eliminated from the playoffs and continue their now 8-game losing streak. Fuck. And Phoenix running back David Sexton had 18 attempts, 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Milwaukee's linebacker, Richard Herron, had 15 tackles and an interception. Then we go a little north to Minneapolis for the coldest game in PFA history, and the first one with a snowstorm too, as the Oakland Majors visit the Minneapolis Kitsune, who are still trying to recover after that 44-6 thrashing they got from the Dallas Stars last week. And remember, if Minneapolis loses, Chicago can clinch the Century Central. But Chicago would have to wait a little later, as Minneapolis would win 24-14 to give Oakland their first losing season, even though it says winning on the title. But Oakland's wide receiver Joshua Crane had 6 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. Wide receiver Jonathan Kasky of Minneapolis had 7 receptions, 108 yards. 4 field goals missed in this entire game. Two of them by both teams each. And 8 sacks in this game, 6 by Oakland, so their defense did good, but just was not enough to stop Minneapolis. After that, we go south to New Orleans for a very, very, very important game. The undefeated Omaha Thunder visiting the New Orleans Jazz, with Omaha win needing to possibly clinch for first round bye and home field advantage, and New Orleans needing to win to keep up against Dallas and Miami in the Century South. And Omaha would finally fall 27-14 in a very ugly fashion. New Orleans absolutely demolished Omaha at home today, and in Omaha's franchise season and league in 14 best wins, New Orleans scored 21 unanswered points in the second quarter, and their wide receiver Mark Matson had 7 receptions, 116 yards, and a touchdown, but Omaha's defense did put a lot of pressure by getting 4 sacks. So Omaha blew any shot to clinch first round bye. Then we go to Oklahoma City as the Chicago 71ers visit the Oklahoma Oilers, with Chicago needing to win to clinch the Century Central, and Oklahoma needing to win to get above 500 for the first time and still remain in a competitive spot for a Century Conference playoff appearance. It would take overtime, but Chicago would do it to win 30-24. They tied up with 48 seconds left in regulation. 71ers wide receiver David Tapia had 8 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Oilers linebacker Michael Southard had 13 tackles, and free safety Wayne Place had 6 tackles and 2 interceptions, but just was not enough to stop Chicago. And with that, Chicago 71ers clinched the 2016 Century Central Championship, the first team in the Century Conference to clinch a playoff spot. But there still is a very, very, very competitive conference, and Chicago's going to have to win out if they want any shot to clinch first round bye and home field advantage. Because San Diego, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Dallas, and maybe San Francisco too are all going to fight hard to get that spot. Well, after Chicago clinched the Century Central, they're going to watch their division rival Detroit Engines visit the Orlando Astros, a rematch from Week 1, where Orlando blew a 17-point lead at one point against Detroit to lose. So let's see how they would do in a rematch. And Orlando would get revenge 31-21. They were up 31-7 at one point, and Detroit got their first losing season, but their wide receiver Raymond Cook had 7 receptions, 112 yards. Joshua Moses had 4 receptions, 119 yards, and a touchdown, along with Robert Price had 2 receptions, 190 yards. 4 sacks by Orlando's Charles McCarty and James Lyons, so their defense did a really good job here today. And Detroit has now lost 8 in a row, now tying Milwaukee for the longest losing streak this season at the moment. Then we go back up to DC for a very, very, very big game. The Pittsburgh Blitz visit the Washington Americans, with playoff spots on the line here in both the Century and National Conferences. And Pittsburgh would win in a defensive struggle 10-9. Already mentioned Washington clinched the National East, and Omaha blew a big opportunity when they lost to New Orleans. They could have clinched home field advantage today if they just beat New Orleans. Washington's linebacker Joshua Leiva had 12 tackles and a sack, along with defensive end Ira Washington had 10 tackles and a sack. And Pittsburgh has now won 4 in a row, but still behind Baltimore. Speaking of Baltimore, we're going to go watch them visit the El Paso Mustangs, with Baltimore winning to clinch a playoff spot in the rain. And thanks to Baltimore's incredible offensive performance and their defense this week, Baltimore would win and clinch a playoff spot, as quarterback Andrew Lasser was 18-28, 239 yards, and 4 touchdowns! All of them in the first half. El Paso's running back Allen Davis continued to be impressive this year. 28 attempts, 158 yards, but no touchdown off of it. But Baltimore's linebacker Curtis Dick had 11 tackles, 1 forced fumble and recovered it, and Richard Parrish had 10 tackles. So congratulations to Baltimore for clinching a playoff spot, but they still got a lot of work to do to clinch the Century East away from Pittsburgh, as they're still just barely a game ahead of it. Then we go out to Las Vegas as they're playing in the rain, but the Seattle Quakes will visit the Las Vegas Gamblers, and Las Vegas would win 24-17 to knock Seattle out of the playoffs. And quarterback Keith Belcher was 23 of 32, 234 yards, a touchdown and a pick. And wide receiver Eric Benjamin had 6 receptions, 127 yards. Las Vegas is going to have a lot of work to do as they got 2 very, very big games coming up next couple weeks. Then we go out to Los Angeles. It's a rematch from many weeks ago as the Portland Dragons visit the Los Angeles Angels. And Portland's trying to end their 3-game losing streak. Despite a great day on offense, Los Angeles would win 24-14 to make Portland now go on a 4-game losing streak. They've gone 2-6 after starting 7-0. Portland's quarterback Frederick Van Dyke was 15-24, 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Los Angeles quarterback Maurice Green had 18-28, 251 yards and a touchdown. But their running back John Fox was 25 attempts, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Leo Dennis had 6 receptions and 107 yards. Then we go out to Santa Clara, for a very, very, very important Century West game as the San Diego Rays visit the San Francisco Union. And if San Diego wins, they clinch a playoff spot, but still not the Century West yet. And San Francisco would destroy San Diego, getting their first win season. They scored 24 unanswered points to end the game. And San Francisco's quarterback Ruben Williams, who still is the backup, was 13 of 24, 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's thrown 9 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions now in the year. And their running back Anthony Marks had 24 attempts, 126 yards, and a touchdown. San Francisco did good, but they still got a lot of work to do if they want to have any shot to overtake San Diego for the Century West. And then we go up to Houston for the Sunday Nighter. The Columbus Barons visiting the Houston Twisters. Houston needing to win to have any shot still at clinching a playoff spot in the Century Conference. And Houston would win a hard-fought game as Columbus's quarterback Albert Hedrick was 23 of 32, 267 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their running back Matthew Watson had 16 carries, 103 yards, his first 100-yard game. And Houston's wide receiver Robert Brown had 6 receptions, 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. And George Forrest had 12 tackles. Not a bad day for Houston, as they've now won 2 in a row after that 51-0 decimation against Las Vegas. But now we go down to Miami for the Monday Nighter, and a nice 78 degrees for the players at least. Rare to get a warm game here as the Buffalo Sabres visit the Miami Sharks. Miami needing a win to keep up in the Century South's division race in a playoff spot, and same goes for Buffalo, who now can't clinch the Century East, but still have a shot for a playoff spot. But Miami would destroy Buffalo 33-17 to officially give Buffalo their first loss on the road after they start off, I think it was 6-1. And Miami's quarterback Anthony McCormick did much better this week compared to last week, was 22 of 34, 235 yards and a touchdown. Miami's running back Douglas Jackson had 22 attempts, 112 yards, and 1 reception touchdown. And Victor Green was 8 receptions, 107 yards. But Buffalo's linebacker James Ferris had 11 tackles, so not a bad day for him. But what a turnaround, though, for Miami. They start off 1-6, and they've gone 7-1 since, but they've put themselves in such a big hole it might not be enough to clinch a playoff spot still, especially since they got to go to New Orleans next week. But that's it for Week 17 as we look at the standings after Week 18. As you see, Washington has clinched the the National East. They still have a 3-game lead over Boston in the National East, though. Omaha's lead in the National Central has shrunk to 6, but it doesn't matter as they still have the playoffs. Now Birmingham has the lead over Atlanta in the Century South, National South by a game. And Phoenix still has a tiebreaker over Los Angeles in the National West. Baltimore has a half a game lead over Pittsburgh in the Century East as they clinch a playoff spot. And Chicago has a 3-game lead still over Minneapolis in the Century Central despite the division win. New Orleans now has a game lead over Dallas in the Century South. And San Diego's lead against San Francisco in the Century West has shrunk by 1. So now let's take a look at the playoff standings in the National Conference. Omaha still has the number 1 spot, but now Phoenix takes over Washington for the 2nd seed. Washington fell down to the 3rd seed. Birmingham now leapfrogged to the 4th seed. Los Angeles still the 5th seed, and Atlanta has fallen to the 6th seed. And Portland's fallen out of the playoff map completely, though. Now, for playoff picks, Omaha can clinch first-round bye. If they win, that's all they got to do. Just win, or Phoenix and Washington lose. But either way, they clinch first round home field advantage that happens. And if one of them loses, they clinch first round bye. But if they all lose or Omaha wins, they clinch home field advantage. Phoenix clinches a playoff spot if they win or Portland loses. And Los Angeles will clinch a playoff spot if they win or, win and Atlanta or Portland loses. Which one of them loses, Los Angeles will clinch one of the playoff spots. So that's it for the National Conference as we go over to the Century Conference, where Chicago has clinched the #1 spot still with the division win, and Baltimore with the playoff spot clinched is now the 2nd seed. San Diego has fallen to the 3rd seed, New Orleans still the 4th seed, Pittsburgh still the 5th seed, and San Francisco has leapfrogged over Dallas for the 6th seed. San Diego can clinch a playoff spot if they win or Dallas and Minneapolis loses. New Orleans will clinch a playoff spot if they win against Miami and Minneapolis and Dallas loses. And Pittsburgh will clinch a playoff spot if they win and Minneapolis and Dallas loses. And Houston, Oklahoma, Buffalo, Kansas City, and Miami, and probably Minneapolis too, would all be eliminated in all those scenarios if all that happened. So almost the entire Century Conference will be done for by then. So now here's the schedule for Week 8. First up would be Orlando going to Baltimore, Omaha going to Boston, a rematch from a couple weeks ago, Birmingham going to Buffalo, Columbus going to Chicago, rematch from many weeks ago, Tampa going to Cincinnati, Minneapolis going to Dallas, a rematch from 2 weeks ago. I wonder if Minneapolis will get revenge from that game. Or El Paso going to Detroit, a rematch from many weeks ago, Houston going to Jacksonville, Denver going to Louisville, a very important Century South game, Miami going to New Orleans, San Antonio going to Philadelphia, and Atlanta going to Pittsburgh. And then for the 4 p.m. games, it'll be Cleveland going to New Orleans. This could have been a matchup for a PF Bowl preview, perhaps. Indianapolis going to Los Angeles. Washington going to Oakland. Kansas City going to Oklahoma. Honolulu going to Portland. And then Seattle going to San Diego. And then for the Sunday night game, Manhattan going to San Francisco. And the Monday night, a rematch from this week too, Milwaukee going to Phoenix. Man, I can't believe there's just 3 weeks left of the season before we get the playoffs. And I can't wait for Week 18 to see what incredible action will be. So tune in soon for Week 18 of the 2016 PFA season. Zane!